Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for advance sight of the White Paper and for his statement and for our frequent conversations about this White Paper since I was appointed to this post. The catastrophe in Gaza is a strong reminder not just of the need for humanitarian assistance and expertise, but of the heavy responsibility we all face to play our part in the world through the painstaking hard yards of diplomacy and the crucial importance of development in providing the hope that breathes life into any peace process. So I thank the Minister for his personal efforts to bring some energy and direction to this agenda again. In fact, I would go as far as to say that were he not in post, I do not believe that this House would be in a position to consider a new White Paper. And I think, listening to the views of honourable members behind me, I think that view is shared by many of us. But to have an honest conversation about where we're heading, we need a frank assessment of where we've been. The mindless vandalism of the decision to take one of our most respected, influential contributions to the world, the partnerships, thought leadership and innovation, and trash the lot to deflect from a domestic crisis, a Prime Minister who was shamed by a young footballer into abandoning his decision to allow children to go hungry in a pandemic, so pulled the rug out from under the poorest people in the poorest countries. Make no mistake, it cost lives, but it also cost Britain its reputation as a gold standard leader in this field. And as the honourable member said, a strategic mistake with deadly consequences. Now, he knows that I admire his determination to speak out against those decisions, and I know that he doesn't shy away from the damage that it has done. But while the former Prime Minister may be gone, his second-in-command, whose signature is scrawled across those documents, now sits in number 10. His short words at the start of this paper leave me in no doubt that while his posture has changed, his position has not. And frankly, asking the man who signed off the devastation of this vital agenda to breathe new life into it again is like calling out the arsonist to put out the fire. For much of the agenda he set out today, he will have our support. The question is whether he'll have his Prime Minister's. Now, he's right to recognise that the major obstacle to eliminating extreme poverty is the growing challenge of climate change and debt. But the key is how to resolve this. The multilateral system is strained. Much of the world's debt is owed to private creditors, and over recent decades, China's influence has grown. So we welcome strongly the recognition in this paper that Britain's approach to development must sit in a multipolar world. And yet, multilateral aid will fall to just 25% of aid spending by 2025. So while the commitments in this White Paper are welcome, the Minister is prioritising multilateralism while his department prioritises bilateralism. Which is it? A strategy at odds with the ambition. And here's the second problem. To make this work, he will need to convince the world that Britain is a long-term reliable partner with serious commitment at the highest levels of government. But his own White Paper is silent on protecting the Overseas Development Assistance budget from raids by other departments, after 30% in the last year has been raided by the Home Office alone to pay for spiralling hotel bills and the cost of this government's chaos. What chance has he got of convincing the world that this is a priority for government if he can't convince his colleagues around the cabinet table? In fact, I suspect that on the central issue, the need to deal with debt and finance constraints that block action on climate, he and I have more in common than he does with most of them. And there's much to welcome here, but access to finance for many of the most heavily indebted countries is ultimately unachievable. He's embracing some of the new ideas on finance, but when it comes to the central issue of debt, where is the fresh thinking? The outsized role of the City of London compels us to do more. Now is not the time to cling to existing strategies, but to leave no stone unturned. And secondly, the problem of climate finance and debt for middle-income countries does enable us to focus on low-income countries and the core task of eliminating extreme poverty, but there's far too little here about how this can be achieved. We welcome the focus on conflict, but the route out of poverty lies not just in access to finance and functioning economies, but self-sustaining health, education and welfare systems designed and run by people in countries themselves. What can he do to reassure this House this isn't a second-order issue? Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, he and I have discussed the central importance of women and girls many times. They've been amongst the biggest losers of the decisions of recent decades. Empowering them is the biggest untapped driver of growth in the global economy, and there is no way of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals without closing this shameful gap. That is why they must run like a thread through the whole agenda, not just an addition to it, not a few pages in a document. Every single decision that comes across his desk must consider, does it do more to empower and enable women and girls to succeed, or does it do less? I welcome and support his commitment to this agenda, but without the political backing, without the budget, without the priority in government, he will not succeed. He is far more alive to the scale and the nature of the problems that Britain faces and the world faces than most of his colleagues. But the challenges of this era demand an end to old ways of thinking and an embrace of the new. I know he's open to it, but is his government?